Big thanks to Napoleon Grills for sponsoring this episode.
I got a beautiful and delicious pork leg raised from my own farm, and look at this beauty. Whoa. A delicious piece of pork, beautiful dark red meat, good amount of intermuscular fat. This is going to be so tasty. This beautiful pork leg is going to get transformed. I'm going to work it with my knife and open it up and turn it into something that is easy to handle on a barbecue for you and me. So first I'm going to start by taking off the skin. And let me remind you, you can have your butcher do all of this for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you buy larger cuts of meat, it's going to be cheaper. This is what is called a technical cut. This is how the butcher orders his meat. He orders technical cuts, then he cuts it up for you. And if you learn how to do it yourself, he doesn't have to do the job, and you're gonna save a few euros per kilogram. Yes, I'm so Dutch. And I really recommend getting the right tool for the job, so a deboning knife is absolutely perfect. And that means you have a lot of maneuverability. It makes your job easier. With the skin removed, we still have a little bit of ribs sitting here. I'm gonna take those off just as well. Don't throw these ribs away. This is so delicious when you grill them or fry them in the oven, or just put them on the side on the grill. The next part of the job is to take the bones out. So I'm gonna run my knife to where I think the bone is and then just drop all the way down to the bone. And then start moving my knife along the bone. Now the last part of the bone is called the ham hock, and it is basically the heel of the leg, which consists of meat and a lot of tough silver skin. And this either needs to be cooked low and slow on the barbecue or in a stew, which technically means we're not going to be able to grill this because it's just going to be super tough. So I'm saving that for a nice Italian stew that I've got planned. I removed the bones, and this is going to be saved for that same Italian stew. And then I'm left with this ugly piece of meat. Well, of course a butcher can do a way better job of getting a beautiful piece of meat out of this, but I can't. And I'm not too worried about it either, because I'm going to butterfly it and open it up all the way so I get a giant flat piece that I can grill. And it looks kind of messy, but we're going to make it even worse by cutting into it. And by doing so, we're going to maximize the surface even further, because that's the whole trick about this. I want this to cook fairly easily, which means I need to have this as thin as possible. And I want surface for the flavor to get into. I want surface to have contact with the grill. And all of that surface means flavor onto our meat. Now flip this around, do the same thing on the other side, carve into it. And if you get little holes where you can see through from one side to the other side, that's totally fine as well. The next step is to get some flavor on that pork leg. So I'm going to take some fresh onions, and I want powerful onions. Now you got red onions, you got these giant Spanish onions, which are great for blooming onions. And you have sweet onions. Onions are just not onions. You got special onions and less special onions. What I want to say is that I'm going to use red onions. They're super powerful. I'm going to peel them and dice them up. I discovered I am quite the onion guy. I'm more an onion guy than a garlic guy. The question is, what are you? Next up, 5 garlic cloves, 1 red bell pepper. Time to bring out the old clay pot. In goes 3 crushed bay leaves, 10 cloves, and I'm gonna bash that fine. Then in goes the garlic, the onion, and the bell pepper. 3 tablespoons salt. Grind that fine again. This is so messy. And this is an extremely potent spice mixture. It's very, 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 very affordable. And if you skip the bell pepper, it's crazy affordable. I'm just saying, I ain't keeping you from barbecue. Now this spice mix is gonna go onto our pork, and I'm gonna rub it in, making sure that all the juices find their spot, and I'm gonna marinate this meat with the best flavors in the world. If you could only smell what's happening on this table, it will blow your mind. Fresh spices is one of the best things you can do with meat. Work that a little bit, and now we gotta practice some patience. We got the flavors on, and we're going to let this sit for a while. About 10 minutes is just fine, and it's plenty of time for us to fire up the barbecue. I'll be cooking on the Napoleon Professional Charcoal Grill. That's why I'm gonna need some briquettes. Who put the charcoal briquettes up here? See, that's why I need an assistant. Anybody wants to be my assistant? Step 1, take the grill grates out. Raise the charcoal bed, place in a little bit of charcoal briquettes, then add some lit charcoal briquettes on top of those. Spread the briquettes out evenly. I now created a hot zone, a medium zone and a cold zone, which means that while I'm grilling I have ultimate control over the temperatures in my barbecue, and I'm even able to lower the charcoal bed all the way down if I still have too much heat. Because you got to think about that pork leg, it has so much fat in it, and that fat drops onto the briquettes. You might have flare-ups, and we definitely want to prevent that as much as possible. The grill grates go back in. Let's put the pork leg on the fire over the hottest part of the grill. And as you can hear, nothing exciting is just happening yet. Now I'm going to raise it up and you will hear the difference. Slowly you start to hear a light sizzle popping up. That means the meat is starting to cook. Fat is rendering down all those little bubbles. That's what you hear. So it's time to take a look and see how fast it's going. And you can see some parts are getting a little bit of char, other parts are not even starting to cook yet. And that's why we gotta move it around to make sure everything gets a little bit of crust and loads of flavor. As you can see, we're building up a beautiful crust on both sides, and I'm gonna keep moving it around every time just to make sure everywhere gets a nice crust, because this is all about crust. This is not about how can I cook it to perfection core temperature wise. This is how do I get the perfect crust and, well, basically the most amount of flavor on the outside of this beautiful piece of pork. A lot of people are going to think, why are you doing this? This is a tough cut of meat. You need to do this slow and slow. But just think about, why could you do this with lamb and why couldn't you do this with pork? Think about that. In the meantime, I'm going to take these peppers and bell peppers and I'm going to roast them straight over the fire next to the pork. And what I'm looking for is a little bit of char. Let's take it off. And I'm going to drop it on a sheet of aluminum foil. Then I'm going to squeeze on some lime to brighten the flavors up and wrap it up in the aluminum foil. I'm going to let this rest for at least 10 minutes. In the meantime, my chilies and peppers got fully cooked and have a nice char on the outside, so it's also time to take them off. Put them in the blender, add a whole red onion, 2 garlic cloves, 2 teaspoons of salt and 1 teaspoon of ground pepper. Grind it all up. This might be a little spicy, just to make sure. Fair warning, definitely spicy. Whew. But I'm going to take care of that. I got a hot oil in a pan and I'm going to put the spicy stuff in the hot oil and thereby frying the whole thing. And the frying is going to make it less spicy. Of course, normally you don't do it like this in the kitchen, but on video it looks awesome. Once the sauce reduced, it is done, and look at that. And our beautiful sauce is ready to be put on our delicious meat. Let's take a look at our pork leg and see how it turned out. That is one delicious looking piece of meat. I'm just gonna slice a chunk out of this, and you can see that it's cooked to well done, and I'm gonna slice all that into thin strips. You can see a little bit of pink here, and that pink doesn't mean it's undercooked with pork. It means the pork has flavor. But it's not about the inside. This is all about the outside. Let's give this a try. This is just a thin slice, and it only has a little bit of crust. But the amount of flavor that this crust has, you can never get this with dry herbs. This literally is mind-blowing tasteful. Well, there you have it, a delicious pork roast leg with a nice, fresh, homemade hot sauce. I still need to try that hot sauce and figure out how sharp it still is. Oh, it's actually quite good. And with hot sauces, it's all about flavor.